Hello everyone, my name is Ange de Lumière and doing this episode as the first episode of my podcast called From Logic to Magic, and I'm recording this live on Facebook, but it's probably going to be posted as a video on my YouTube channel as well. And I'm so excited to start these podcasts, which will be how to help people marry logic to magic to get to the highest potential that they can reach in their business and in their lives. So let me introduce myself very briefly. I'm Ange de Lumière, I'm your host, and I'm going to talk today about the power of journaling. I call myself a spiritual lawyer, and the reason for this is that I used to be a corporate lawyer. And then I branched out and trained in all sorts of modalities that link to healing and intuition. And my goal is to bring back those tools into mainstream business to help entrepreneurs reach the success that they thrive for. Now, success can mean a lot of different things for different people. And for people who make a lot of money, success is more about finding a bigger purpose, and for people who have a big purpose but who are struggling to make money, that can be the other way around. Success can be about finally your business taking off. Whichever way you want your success to happen, I believe I can help you. And today we're going to talk about the power of journaling in order to do that. So there are many different ways to journal. Apparently I heard from another colleague who talks about journaling, and she's wonderful, that there's 28 different ways to journal, and I really didn't want to go into researching that because I don't want to confuse you with so many different ways. I want to talk about 7 ways that I've used journals to how can I say, peel off some layers, get more focused, and also reflect on what I do in my business so that I am actually more efficient rather than busy. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm going to list first the first 7 ways you can use journaling in business. Because for me, only a few years ago, journaling was only a thing that teenage girls did to vent out their frustrations, to talk about their first boyfriends, to bitch about their mums, whatever it is that they did in their journals. And honestly, it bored me stiff. I tried journaling a couple of times as a teenager, and very quickly, when I reread what I was writing, I just felt utterly bored, and I thought I was a pretty awful person. And so I decided to stop journaling because it didn't feel aligned or useful. Okay, now the reason why journaling didn't work for me back then is because I didn't have a framework to use journaling for. I didn't know that it had a bigger purpose, whereas now I do, through trial and error, and also through listening to other people and then doing my own work. So initially I started to use journaling with my clients as a clinical hypnotherapist, because what I realized is that whatever thoughts, especially negative thoughts, unhelpful belief and everything, if you keep them in your head, good morning Jojo, if you keep them in your head, what will happen is, and actually this is not purely come from my clinical hypnotherapist experience. It's because I'm both a clinical hypnotherapist and a Reiki master, so I know about energy. And sometimes when people would come to me in my mainstream practice, which I no longer do because now I work for business, is that I would see almost like a cloud of energy around people's heads. And I realized that in order to do that, I could give them a kickstart in clearing their minds by doing some Reiki on them and pulling the energy out. And it was more than Reiki, it was energy work. But if they didn't understand how their mind worked, and if they entertained those negative thoughts again, they would recreate the cloud very quickly. So I had to combine an energetic approach to a mindset approach. I couldn't do one without the other because the energy was there and I could feel it. This big cloud, and sometimes the cloud was so thick, I wondered how people could even think. So this is a bit what the journaling can do, and this is the main aspect that we're going to discuss today, is how to use journaling to literally clear your mind. But before I do that, I want to talk about the 7 different aspects you can use a journal, which I find very exciting. So the first one is for goal setting and planning in your business. It's important. And having said that, this is an exercise I'm doing at the moment because I've signed up for a 100-day goal with another coach. So I'm always curious to learn new things. But for me, setting goals was something that I resisted for a long time. And I found a way, now I'm kind of warming up to it more and more. And the reason why I didn't find the goals work so much for me, or the planning, is because a lot of the things that I do are inspired by something bigger. So if I plan too much, that I don't leave enough space for inspiration to come in. But actually, I can see now that you need both. You need to have a sort of, and when I say that, I had a big plan. I was going to launch my Get Started With Your Book program in September. I'd recorded it back in May in my last batch of clients, students, whatever you want to call them, people who took part in my courses. I had been working my business for nearly 2 years to build it to the point where I was starting to leverage on the content of my business. And boom, last week, the universe, whatever, my guides, whoever you want to call them, decided that I need to change direction completely in my business. And now I'm working with business as a psychic business success strategist. I like to call myself spiritual lawyer. And actually on Facebook, if I tried to enter psychic business strategist, and it blocked me because they don't like the word psychic. So I'm going for spiritual lawyer officially, but you all know what I do now. So goal setting and planning is still important as long as you don't hang on to it like straws, like things that, so something solid, because I believe that you need to be also open to the universe showing you which direction you need to go to. And in the case of my business, what happened is that my offers to help people to write their books weren't taken, but when I tried the Akashic Records readings, it was snapped away like that. So clearly the energy was going another way, and so I had to, it happened over the course of the last 2 months, and then I had to reassess and decide, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going through? But this is something that can also be accessed, this wisdom, through journaling, because journaling can also be about reflecting, which was my point number 5, but you reflect on what worked and what didn't work. And so this is how you follow the energy. Really, you should be following what worked, even though it wasn't in your nice plan to start with, okay? And when you reflect on what didn't work, that also helped you, as long as you don't take this to beat yourself on the head, which I often do, so I know all about it. It's good to reflect on what doesn't work, because then you can tweak things. You can sort of try to find out why, maybe do some research or talk it with someone else. Either, so if you are an author, you can bounce ideas with another author, as long as they're experienced and they can feedback to you from their own experience. And that's very good to reflect. So that was point 5 now, number 2. Point 1 was goal setting. Point 2 was reflecting. Tracking progress is also incredibly important. That's something you can do in your journal. And I was going to show you an example, but I don't have it at hand, so I'm a little bit unprepared in a way. But in a way, because people are going to listen to this on audio as well, it doesn't make sense me showing you something. So I don't know if you've heard about the bullet journal. I find it an incredible, powerful method, and in there I'm going to put in the show notes and under this video a link to a little video on Facebook that shows you how you can bullet journal, and in lots of different ways. And that's something that has really inspired me. I've done this for 2 years, and now I track every day the progress on what I do by coloring little boxes, and you can do it whichever way you want, but it's just ideas that you can, and whatever you track. So we're talking about tracking and progress, you improve. Because whether it's what you eat, what you do, you know, whatever you want to improve, we always tend to either underestimate or overestimate what we do. And like, we underestimate the bad habits and we overestimate the good ones. So tracking is not a way to tell you what you're doing is wrong. It's just to show you exactly what is, because if you're not clear about what is happening, then you can't improve the situation. So tracking is always important, and keeping a journal can be really good for that. At the end of this list, I'll explain to you which journal I use for what, because actually these are activities that you can do within journaling, but I believe we should have different sets of journals for different activities, and I'll give you some pointers of how you can use them. The fourth is the mindset work. So the mindset work is to identify beliefs that you may have that are unhelpful. Obviously the helpful ones we don't need to work on, because if you believe that you're good at what you are, I don't see any reason why you should debunk that belief, unless this comes in the way, unless it's your ego speaking and it's coming in the way of you learning something new that you should be learning, and your ego chips in saying you don't need to do this, you already knows this, but it's a way to keep you small because it's scared about you taking that step in the next direction. In that case, you need to pay attention to the voice and recognize the voice. And doing journaling can also help you to recognize the voices. And even though it's going to be the subject of probably a different episode, because I really want to stick to journaling today, it's really important to recognize when your thoughts come from ego rather than when they come from a intuition, for example, or a bigger picture, or something positive, or your own creativity. And interestingly enough, I had, when I announced this episode on my Facebook page as an event, I had two lovely ladies comment on my post and say that they use journaling to clarify their thoughts and to get, to jot them down and find some sort of sense in their thinking. So the fifth aspect is a mind dump, and that's really important, and that should probably be done in a very separate journal than anything else that you use. A very cheap piece of paper, like you know, those journalist notebook, I don't know exactly what they're called, and then you just write down all the thoughts that come to you, maybe for half an hour, and that's really good to do before you start your day. Just to clear your mind, because if I remember right, I did a bit of research, we have an average of 3,000 thoughts per hour. So you can imagine how many thoughts we have per day, and this is very busy. We have very busy minds, and if we don't learn how to clear our minds when we want to do work, like creative work in particular, then all these thoughts are going to come in the way of getting the messages, the ideas, the inspiration that we need, whether it's for writing or whether it's to run our businesses. So doing a mind dump is really important, as long as you never read it again. And that's actually probably the most typical of the journaling that, as I said initially in this recording, teenage girls do. When they're in their, you know, when they're going through all the learning and the emotions and the hormones, and they need some sort of outlet, that's a mind dump. But what I've never been taught back then is that you're not supposed to read it again, because otherwise you take back all that dump. It's like, it would be like, you know, rummaging through your bin or your garbage can. Who wants to do that? You know, the mind dump is definitely, it's just to put down the thoughts and get rid of the energy. And this is something I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. The sixth, actually it's the fifth because I swapped over, is recording. So it's recording progress. Again, it's a little bit like tracking, but it's slightly different. I do a business journal. I can actually show you one. I'm just going to grab one for a second. But I will also probably post a picture of it so that people who are listening to this audio can have a look. So this was one of my trackers. I like to show these pictures because I find it so inspiring. And at the time, it was a happy habit tracker that I created with the spirit of the bullet journal. Except, as you can see, all the little squares that I've colored on this page are different colors, and they almost like create like a rainbow. For me, rainbows uplift me. And it was interesting as well, as I was tracking what I was doing to keep my happy habits going, because it was I was doing a course on manifesting where you were trying to keep high vibe as much as you could, and this enabled me as well to see patterns, but also to acknowledge that you can't do everything every day. So if I did part of what was asked of me on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, then that was good enough. But what you can do as well when you keep a business journal, or whatever journal you want to call it, is that it will help you also record some of the progress if you keep a continuity within those journals. And the way the bullet journal works as well is that at the beginning of the journal you put an index, so you leave how many pages? I'm just turning the pages now. Probably 4 to 5 pages at the beginning of your book blank, so that when you finish the journal you can go back to the beginning and you can write down for each, you can number all the pages, and at the end of it you can create an index, which is incredibly useful if you want to go back to old journals. But I found recently, whilst I was doing that, because I was doing a course, so all my learning when I do courses, I put them in the same journal, my business journal, because most of it is related to my business. It was so lovely to see the progress I have done in the past 2 years. And this is one of the aspects of journaling that I find very gratifying. And the last one is the gratitude journal. So I'm going to now, and having a gratitude practice can be incredibly helpful, because in our society, as it stands now, with the news and being bombarded with bad news all the time, and our minds from very young have actually been focused on noticing what doesn't work rather than what works. And in a way it's the same when we start school, because although nowadays I think you get a lot more encouragement in school than I did when I was little, but there's still an emphasis on looking at what's wrong, trying to fix what's wrong, and of course it's important to do that. That's called course correcting. But if there's too much emphasis on that, and in general I think there is a lot of emphasis on our newsfeed about what's going wrong, then we get stuck into not seeing what is going right. And for me, as a spiritual lawyer talking to you today, I think it's incredibly important for you to focus on the gratitude on what is going right, because this is where your energy will be going, and as a consequence this is what the universe will bring you more of, if that makes any sense. So my tip to keep your journal is that they should be separate depending on what kind of activity you should do. And if you want to keep things simple at this point, I would probably suggest 2 journals. One is your positive journal, or you can call it your business journal, your ideas, your creative journal, your magical journal, whatever word you want to use it. And in there you kind of gather quotes, you do your tracking, you do your planning, you take notes for when you learn something. Like for example, if you're watching this video or listening to this recording and you learn something new, you want to take notes in your positive diary. If you want to reflect or record, or your gratitude journal, I would put it all in that journal, because the activities, they go towards the positive. And then I would encourage you to have a separate journal, and mine is black and very simple. And at the end, I've posted a picture a couple of days ago, I don't know if you've seen it. I then tear the pages off and then I rip them away. Now you can do whatever you want. You can put them in the bin. Some people flush it in the toilet. Problem is you can block your toilet, so that might not be such a good idea. You can burn them if you want, but the thing is you don't actually have to do that, as long as, this is what I wanted to explain today, if you set your intent when you do your mind up, or I call it the release journal. When you do your release journal, what you want to do is set the intent when you're doing it, that you are carrying the negative energy out of your body into your arm, into your pen. And I find it quite good to use a black pen for that, so that I see the blackness coming out of me. So the exercise is to actually visualize, and a lot of the energy work that I do, and a lot of energy work is done through the imagination. So it's much more powerful than you think it is. So instead of just dumping the stuff on your journal without an intent, set your intent that when you write down, you're literally emptying the system. You're emptying your body of everything negative that you no longer want in your life. And I did that this morning. It's quite important to do that in a calm environment. Hello, Dominique. It's important to set your intent, and perhaps I would say, and I know for some of you it might be a new concept, but I want you to keep an open mind. Call in some angels to support you through the process so that you don't get sucked into the negativity, if that makes any sense. And I want to say, if you've had some big traumas, or you have some big problems that have happened in your life and that are huge, feel very, very big, then I would encourage you to reach out to a therapist or someone to help you through this process, at least some of it. What I'm suggesting to do today is more like a self-help, but it's not meant for deep trauma or things that require a little bit more support from a professional, okay? I mean, because we're talking business here, I'm not a therapist. I'm not talking to you as a one-to-one person therapist in this capacity. So my tip, what I really want you to understand is that everything is energy, and in order to be able to release whatever is in you that is troubling you energetically. So you imagine that you could first try to locate where it is in your body, but it doesn't really matter that much, because what you want is really to set the intent that it comes out of your hand into your arm, almost like a tap, and into your hand, into your pen, onto the paper, into this very specific diary that will only contain your negative thoughts, your doubts, anything that your critical mind, your inner critic tells you, or people call that the inner saboteur or your inner bitch. I'm not too into that, but whatever you want to call her, dump it in your mind dump. And once it's done, close it, and only do that for a limited period of time in the day. First thing in the morning is good, because then you can close it. You can say, okay, you've had your time. I've had my time rehearsing the negativity, and now it's time for me to move on and get on with my day. What's quite important once you've done that is to be able to have, you could go and wash your hands, for example, because then that will signify that you're finished with the exercise and now you're ready to move on. Because everything is energy, whether you realize it or not. And this is something we're going to talk on many different episodes on this podcast that I'm recording live now on my page, is that whether you know that everything is energy or not, it is. So it will affect you. So you might as well learn about all these things so that you can make energy work for you, rather than be a passive recipient or a passive, how do you say, whatever, I can't find the word. Just be active in it. Just understand, keep an open mind, be curious. Because I'm going to give you an example that even people who have no idea about energy, if you come into a room where you see two people sat on a sofa and they have just been arguing before you came in, but they are not telling you that they have, you often have that gut feeling that something's wrong, even though you know nothing about it. So you are already wired to perceive energy, whether you're aware of it or not. All you do, if you don't pay attention, is you just squash it. And that squashing that intuition, squashing that sixth sense, is actually damaging to you. I'm not asking you to embrace the path of the psychic. This is only valid for certain people, and I've embraced it myself after much resistance. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to honor your intuition, to honor the fact that you already know about energy, that you already know about these things, but because of the way our current society schools us, grooms us into this way of thinking that there's only the mind, there's only what you can touch, see, hear, we discard these things. And I had a very interesting conversation with my daughter a couple of days ago, and I said to her, do you find that sometimes some people say things, but what you feel about them doesn't match what their words, the words that are coming out of their mouth. And she said, Mummy, all the time. And I said to her, well, your gut feeling knows best. Trust what you feel rather than what people tell you, because that will be the truth. Now, as adults, we have to unlearn years of training to ignore our feelings, to ignore our feedback system in a way, because this is a way that our bodies, who are much more intuitive and much more tapped in than we are feedbacking to us what is the truth. Because we have been so trained, like it's typical when you ask someone, how are you today? You always say, I'm okay. Most people do anyway, because the way the question is asked is that nobody expects an answer of someone saying, oh my God, I'm having a terrible day, especially if it's like you bump into someone in the street or whatever it is. But if as a child you've had a feeling that something was really wrong with that person, that they were going through something terrible, and you were with your mum or your dad and they had this conversation, it didn't make sense to you, that got you very, very confused. And that got you in the end probably thinking that there's something wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you. I want you to honor that intuition once again. So this is a bit of a rant to explain to you why we are all energetic beings. We all understand energy. It's just we haven't had the proper training or understanding or the information that we needed to be able to make sense of the world. And I guess one of my my calling is to do that in mainstream society. Because those who have had the call of the psychic path have learned to rekindle those gifts, or maybe they've always had them, it's never left them, but for most of us it's been squashed down, and I know for my part it has been for years, and it created all sorts of really awkward situations. So let's get back to journaling. We found the 7 aspects of journaling and how it can help in your business and in your success. Now, the tips, the tip I would give to you, now we know that you can keep 2 main journals. Now, I do personally have also sometimes a journal per project. So if I write a book, I have a journal just for that. And I also have a mini notebook in my bag where I jot down ideas if I don't want to forget them. You can do that in your phone as well, but I think jotting down on things on paper can be a lot nicer and a better way to jot things down. There's been some studies that I had a little research, an article yesterday. There's scientific evidence that when you write things down by hand rather than typing it in a device, there's more learning and more thinking that goes into it rather than when you type it. So it allows that reflecting on what is happening. I think I've covered just about everything. I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the gratitude journaling, but first as well, I want to say the mistake I made initially is that I bought black journals. Like I'm not going to show because some people are just going to listen to the audio. But the problem with these is that you can't put the title on top of the cover. So now what I do is I buy different colored types of notebooks, and for me, for my business, it's pink. You can, I think they do now, the ones with the soft cover, they do them now in all sorts of colors. You have like shades of gray, turquoise, green, orange, as I said, there's pink. And then with a Sharpie, I just write the title of the journal. So it really helps me to keep a continuity between my journals, to know where I am. And then I also write on the side of the journal what it is, which number it is in the sequence of the journals that I've started. So suppose you were going to start a business journal today, I would put on the side of it business diary number 1 and then /2018. So there's an intent for each of the journals and you keep track of them. I've talked also about the methods of the bullet journaling, which I find wonderful, and I'm going to put a link under this video, but also in the show notes of my podcast, so that you can get more inspiration on how to journal. Gratitude journal, I want to say a word about this before I finish, because I found that if you have a specific journal for gratitude, you will actually find more and more ways to be grateful. The more you write, the more you get into the energy. As I said earlier, everything is energy. So if you step into the energy of gratitude with the intent of finding gratitude and expand your gratitude, then you're going to be surprised as you dive into these activities. So what I think I did it probably as part of a program again to increase prosperity, because prosperity teachers do tell us that doing a gratitude journal help with abundance. So I started off and I decided that I would write for as long as I could find something to be grateful for. And I realized, with something I realized before, but it still comes to my awareness all day, every day, that we're only grateful for things until they're pulled away from us. So suppose we're not grateful for our health until we become ill. And then we think, oh my God, it was so nice to be healthy. Now I'm ill and all I can think of is how I'm unwell. Or you, every day, every morning, you have a hot shower, if it works, if you're lucky, because not everybody has. But who thinks of being grateful for hot water in the shower in the morning? Most people don't, and I don't, and it's not something that is part of our default mode, so to speak. So, but if you sit down and be grateful and say, what are all the small things that I don't acknowledge that are actually working in my life? And so, if your shower breaks down, then suddenly when your shower is fixed again, you become grateful for it, but probably only for 2 minutes. And most people actually would probably go into being angry at the fact that the shower doesn't work, but have never actually been grateful for it to be working for so long. So I think I've made my point. There's so many things that we take for granted, including ourselves, including the things that we do, the things that we achieve. So holding this gratitude journal is coming into your life almost like an alien looking in, and identifying all the things that make you happy or that satisfy you in your life in small and big ways. I think it's important to really have the small nitty-gritty thing, like being grateful for food, being grateful for the house that you have, even though it might not be the perfect house, it's the house that you have. And this ties into the law of attraction, because even if you didn't like the house where you live and you were wishing for a better house, it's not until you're completely grateful for the house that you have and that you can see how it served a purpose for you, until you can be thankful to it and even write maybe a love letter to it in your gratitude journal, that you can actually release it. If you resist it, you keep it. What you resist persists. So as long as you're frustrated about something, as long as you're resisting something that you don't like, even if you can't see the benefit of it at this point in time, I'm just asking you to be thankful, not just for the things that you like, but also for the things that irritate you, that frustrate you, because there's always a hidden blessing in everything. And even the fact that you can't see it today doesn't matter. You will maybe at some point. It could take 2 months, it could take 3 years, it could take 30 years for you to finally realize why that thing that was really grating you was something that had a potential benefit for you. It had a lesson, it had something that you could unlock as long as you could look at it in a different way. Does that make sense? So I'm going to open now this Facebook Live for questions, if you want to ask me a few questions right now. And if not, I'm going to thank everyone who's come live onto this episode. And I'm going to be holding another episode next week at the same time, 7 a.m. UK time live. But you will also be able to find a recording on my Facebook page, on my YouTube page, and soon on my podcast when I create it. It's going to be called From Logic to Magic. And I'm very grateful for you to have joined me today. Thank you very much. And speak to you soon. Bye.